The great hall of the kingdom was filled with shadows. Tall pillars stretched toward the ceiling. Torches flickered along the walls, and the air smelled of smoke and incense. The nobles stood in silence, each dressed in heavy robes and glittering jewels, waiting for their princess to speak. She sat on a golden throne, her eyes cold, her hands resting on the arms of her seat. For weeks she had been quiet, her heart heavy with disappointment. But now she lifted her chin and broke the silence. "I want a beast," she said, her voice echoing across the stone walls. The words struck the court like a hammer. Some gasped, others whispered among themselves. It was not unusual for rulers to demand gifts, but this demand was different. A beast was not a jewel, not a crown, not a simple treasure. A beast was danger. A beast was a thing that no one truly controlled. The High Lord, an old man with white hair and wise eyes, stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Princess," he said carefully, "we have brought you many beasts before. Wolves from the northern mountains, serpents from the desert, even the great lizards with iron scales. All have been captured and tamed. Which one do you wish to have now?" The princess shook her head slowly. "No, not another wolf on a chain, not another lizard that bows to a whip. I want something wild, something that cannot be broken. I want to see true strength." The nobles looked at one another in fear. They knew the stories. Every creature, no matter how deadly, had eventually been bent to the will of man. The princess was asking for something impossible, something that might bring ruin to her own court. A lady-in-waiting whispered, "But why, my princess? Why wish for such danger?" The princess's eyes grew distant. She looked down at her hands, delicate and pale, and her voice softened. "Because I am tired of weakness hidden behind chains. I am tired of lions that wear collars. I want to see the raw spirit of the wild. I want to see a creature that refuses to bow even if it hates me for it. Only then will I know what true strength looks like." The hall was silent again. The torches crackled. Somewhere in the distance a bell tolled, long and low like the sound of fate. The High Lord studied her face. He had known her since she was a child, when she had played in the gardens and laughed among the flowers. She had grown into a woman who was both beautiful and proud, but also restless, searching for something she could not name. Now he realized what she wanted. Not just a beast, not just danger. She wanted truth, the raw, unshaped truth of life itself. At last, the High Lord bowed lower. "As you command, princess. But remember this, those who ask for wildness must also face its fangs. A beast that cannot be tamed may not protect you. It may destroy you." The princess lifted her chin. "Let it try." Her words spread like fire through the kingdom. Messengers rode through the gates, carrying her demand to every border and every far land. Soldiers, hunters, and traders all whispered about it. Some laughed and said the princess was foolish. Others trembled and said she was brave. For weeks nothing happened. Beasts were offered, but none were accepted. A giant bear with golden fur was dragged to the hall, but the princess shook her head. A horned stag that had killed 3 men before capture was presented, but still she refused. "Too gentle," she said, her eyes cold. "Too weak." The nobles grew worried. "She asks for the impossible," they murmured. "No creature will satisfy her." But the High Lord said nothing. He watched and waited, for he knew the world was wide, and in the far corners of it there were things that even kings had never seen. One stormy night, the messengers returned with strange news. From across the seas, from a land whispered about only in taverns and in tales, they had found a world unlike any other. A death world, they called it. A place where storms tore mountains apart, where beasts hunted in endless forests, where the air itself tested the strength of every breath. From that world, they said, came creatures like none other. The court gathered in secret, their voices low. "Shall we risk it?" one asked. "Shall we bring one of these death world creatures before her?" "It is dangerous," another whispered. "Such things are not meant for cages. If we fail to control it, we may lose the princess and perhaps the whole kingdom." But the High Lord raised his hand. His voice was calm but heavy with meaning. "She asked for the untamed. We must give her what she asked for. To deny her is to call her weak. And if she sees us as weak, then we are already lost." So the order was given. Ships sailed across the Black Sea, searching for the death world. Months passed. The princess waited, restless and impatient. Each night she walked the balcony of her chambers, staring at the stars. She imagined the wildness she had asked for. She imagined eyes that did not look away, a spirit that did not bend. She felt both afraid and excited. though she would never admit fear aloud. One evening, the High Lord came to her side. The moonlight fell across the marble floor, and the sound of the sea carried through the windows. "Princess," he said softly, "when the beast arrives, and if it truly cannot be broken, what then? Will you still want it? Will you stand beside something that may hate you forever?" The princess turned to him. For a moment her proud mask slipped, and her voice was softer, almost human. "If it hates me, then so be it. At least its hatred will be real. I am tired of love that is bought. I am tired of loyalty that is forced. Give me the truth, even if it cuts me." The High Lord bowed his head. He could not argue. He could only pray, and so the world turned. The ships neared the shores of the Death World. The hunters prepared their nets and chains. The court held its breath, waiting for news, and the princess, sitting on her golden throne, closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Bring me something wild. Bring me something that no chain can hold." The storm broke just before dawn. Thunder rolled across the skies, and the sea roared against the cliffs. In the harbor below the castle, a ship with torn sails dragged itself to the shore, its hull scarred by waves and time. Men staggered down the gangplank, their faces pale with exhaustion, and behind them they pulled chains. The news spread like fire. The beast had arrived. The court gathered in the throne hall once again. The nobles stood close to the walls, whispering in fear. The princess sat tall in her golden chair, her eyes sharp with hunger for the sight of what they had brought her. The High Lord, weary from sleepless nights, stood by her side, his hands trembling though his face remained calm. The doors opened. Soldiers entered, their armor wet with rain, dragging heavy iron chains. And at the end of those chains was not a scaled monster, not a horned creature, not some giant lizard from the forests. It was a man. He walked with slow, heavy steps. His feet were bare. His hands were bound, but the chains groaned as if they could barely hold him. His hair was long and dark, tangled by sea wind, and his skin carried the marks of countless scars. His eyes were unlike any the court had ever seen, fierce, bright, alive. The whispers turned to laughter. "This is the beast?" One noble scoffed. "A man? Just flesh and bone? Have the hunters lost their minds?" Another chuckled. "The princess asked for a monster, and they bring her a beggar." But the laughter died quickly. The man lifted his head and looked around the hall. His gaze did not dart nervously as most captives would. It did not fall to the floor in shame or rise in fear. It burned, steady, unyielding, straight into the eyes of those who mocked him. A silence spread. Even the torches seemed to flicker more softly. The soldiers shoved him forward until he stood at the center of the hall. His chains rattled as he stopped. He did not kneel. He did not bow. The High Lord cleared his throat and raised his voice. "Princess, behold, this is no ordinary man. He is from the Death World across the sea. The people there live in storms and endless danger. Their skies burn with fire, their ground shakes with fury. From that world comes this creature. You asked for a beast that cannot be tamed, so we brought you a human." The word hung in the air. Human. A sound strange and heavy to the noble's ears. The princess leaned forward on her throne. Her lips parted slightly, and her eyes glowed with interest. "A human," she whispered, tasting the word. The man's head turned slowly toward her. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a heartbeat the hall seemed to vanish. She saw no fear in him, no submission, only a strange fire like a storm trapped behind his gaze. Her heart beat faster. This was different. This was not like the lions and wolves that had been dragged before her. This man was not pretending to be strong. He was strength. He was wildness. The High Lord gestured, urging the man to kneel. "Bow before the princess," he commanded, his voice firm. "Show her respect, as is the custom of this hall." The human's jaw tightened. He did not move. The soldiers struck him with the flat of their spears, forcing him down. His knees hit the stone floor, but he still did not bow. He raised his head, his eyes blazing. In a low, hoarse voice, he spoke for the first time. "I am no one's pet." Gasps swept through the court. No prisoner had ever dared speak such words. No beast had ever declared its own freedom. The nobles stepped back in fear, as if his voice itself were a weapon. The princess's breath caught. She felt a strange rush of something she could not name, fear, yes, but also wonder. This was what she had wanted. Something real, something that could not be bent by command or threat. One of the younger lords, red with anger, stepped forward. How dare this creature speak so? He should be whipped for his defiance. The man's eyes shifted to him, and for a moment the Lord froze. It was only a glance, but in that glance was the weight of storms and wars, of hunger and survival, of a spirit that had never bowed to anyone. The Lord fell silent. The princess rose from her throne, her golden dress sweeping across the floor. The hall held its breath as she descended the steps, each movement slow and graceful. She stopped just in front of the man. She studied him closely. The lines of scars across his arms, the broadness of his shoulders, the stubborn fire in his eyes. He smelled of sea and earth, of blood and survival. He was nothing like the polished knights who bowed to her every word. He was something older, something raw. Her voice was soft but firm. "You are the beast I asked for?" The man's lips curled into the shadow of a bitter smile. "No, I am worse," her heart pounded. She should have been furious, insulted, outraged by his defiance. But instead she felt alive. For the first time in years, the cold mask she wore as a ruler cracked and something warmer stirred inside her. The High Lord, uneasy, stepped forward. "Princess, this creature is dangerous. He should be caged. He should be tested before he is allowed near you." The princess lifted her hand, silencing him. Her eyes never left the man's. "No cage will hold him," she said softly. And that is exactly what I wanted. The hall was silent, filled with the tension of something greater than fear. The nobles shifted nervously, whispering of curses and doom. But the princess's gaze remained steady, her lips curved in the faintest smile. The beast she had demanded had been given to her. But he was not a monster of scales or claws. He was a man, a human, a storm wrapped in flesh. And as she stood before him, she understood what the High Lord had warned. To ask for something untamed was to invite danger. To stand before it was to risk being broken. But the princess felt no regret. Instead, she whispered a thought to herself, one no one else could hear. "At last," she breathed, "something real." The morning was heavy with mist. The fog rolled down from the mountains and wrapped itself around the stone walls of the castle. The air carried the weight of something about to happen, and the people of the court felt it deep in their bones. Word had spread quickly. Today the human would face the trial. The pit was a place of fear and legend. A deep arena carved from black stone, its floor covered with sand darkened by the blood of those who had fallen before. It was where beasts were tested, where prisoners were broken, where power was put on display for the whole kingdom to see. The nobles gathered along the high walls of the pit, their jeweled robes bright against the morning gloom. The princess sat on a silver chair above them all, her crown glinting faintly in the pale light. Her face was calm, but inside her chest her heart pounded like a drum. The heavy gates opened. Soldiers dragged the human into the pit. His wrists were bound with iron cuffs, though even the strongest chains seemed fragile against the power of his arms. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned, sharp and restless. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the princess. He simply walked forward until he stood in the center of the arena. The crowd murmured. Some laughed, thinking the trial would be quick. Others whispered nervously, remembering the defiance in his voice the day he arrived. A trumpet blared. The second gate opened with a groan of metal. From the darkness inside came a sound that silenced every laugh, every whisper. A low, rumbling growl, deep as thunder. The beast stepped into the light. It was massive, taller than 3 men, its body armored with bone plates and muscle. Its jaws dripped with foam, and its claws scraped long scars into the stone as it moved. Its yellow eyes locked onto the human, and the air seemed to tremble with its fury. The nobles gasped. Even the princess gripped the arm of her chair. This was no ordinary beast. It was a war beast, bred for killing, trained to obey no one but bloodlust itself. Many had died trying to tame it. Many more had died feeding it. The High Lord spoke loudly, his voice carrying across the arena. "Princess, the trial begins. Let us see if the human you asked for can survive even a moment." The chains on the human's wrists were struck loose. The iron fell to the ground with a dull clang. He flexed his hands, slow and deliberate, then lifted his head toward the beast. The world seemed to pause. Then the beast charged. The ground shook beneath its steps. Sand flew into the air. Its jaws opened wide, ready to tear the man apart in a single bite. The crowd screamed, but the human did not run. At the very last moment, he leapt aside with a speed no one had expected. The beast's jaws snapped shut, missing his body by a breath. The man rolled across the sand, grabbing a jagged stone from the ground as he rose. His movements were sharp, instinctive, born not from training but from survival. The beast turned, snarling, its massive tail swinging like a hammer. The human ducked beneath it, darting forward, his body low, his eyes locked on the creature's blind side. He moved like water, flowing, adapting, refusing to stand still long enough to be caught. The nobles leaned forward, shouting in shock. Never had they seen such speed, such fearlessness. The princess could not look away. Her chest burned with fear, but also something else, admiration. This was no performance. This was not the slow, trained fight of men against chained animals. This was life against death. The beast lunged again, its claws tearing through the sand. The human threw himself onto its back, clinging to the ridges of bone. The creature roared, twisting and thrashing, but the man held fast. His arms were wrapped with scars, his muscles straining, his face set in fierce determination. With the stone gripped in his hand, he struck at the beast's eye. Once, twice, again. The stone cracked. The beast roared louder, stumbling, blinded by blood. The crowd erupted in chaos, some screaming for the man to die, others shouting in disbelief. The princess rose from her chair, her lips parted. Her heart was no longer pounding only with fear, it was pounding with awe. The human roared, a sound that shook the arena, not like the cry of prey but like the voice of a storm. With one final strike, he drove the broken stone deep into the beast's eye. The war beast shuddered, collapsed, and fell silent, its massive body shaking the ground as it hit the sand. For a long moment, there was no sound. The human stood slowly, his chest heaving, his body covered in sweat and blood that was not all his own. He dropped the shattered stone to the ground and looked up at the nobles above him. His eyes burned with fire. He did not raise his hands in victory. He did not cry out. He only stood alive, unbroken, unbent. The silence broke. Nobles shouted, some in fury, others in disbelief.
Impossible!
He cheated. No man could do that. But the princess's voice cut through them all. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried more weight than the loudest cry. Yes, she said, her eyes shining. This is the wildness I wanted. The human's gaze turned toward her. For the first time, their eyes met without interruption. And in that gaze was a storm, endless and untamed. The princess's breath caught in her throat. She had asked for a beast. She had been given a man. But in his defiance, in his strength, in his unbroken spirit, he was more beast than any creature she had ever seen. The trial was over. But something greater had begun. The castle was restless after the trial. Servants whispered in the corridors, guards tightened their patrols, and nobles argued behind closed doors. Some called the human a monster. Others called him a miracle, but no one could ignore him anymore. He had survived what no one else had. He had killed the war beast with nothing but his bare hands and a broken stone. The princess, however, was quiet. She returned to her chambers that night with her thoughts heavy. She stood at her balcony, looking out at the dark sea, her heart still pounding from what she had witnessed. She had asked for wildness, and she had seen it with her own eyes. Yet it was not the beast's death that haunted her. It was the human's gaze, the fire that refused to die, the storm that lived inside him. In the days that followed, the human was kept under watch. He was given a small chamber guarded night and day. Iron cuffs were placed on his wrists again, though lighter now, as if even the guards knew chains meant little to him. He was fed, but he ate little, only what was enough to keep him standing. At night, he sat awake, staring through the small barred window at the stars. The princess visited him for the first time 3 days after the trial. She came alone against the advice of the High Lord and her guards. Her footsteps echoed as she walked the dim corridor, and when she opened the heavy door, the human looked up slowly. He was sitting on the stone floor, his back against the wall, his arms resting on his knees. His eyes were tired but still burning with that same strange fire. The princess stepped inside. For a moment she did not speak. She only looked at him, the scars on his arms, the quiet strength in the way he sat, the way his presence filled the room, even in silence. At last, she asked softly, "Do you have a name?" The human's lips moved, but his voice was low, almost rough from disuse. "Names are chains. I left mine behind." Her heart trembled at his words. It was an answer like no other. Everyone in her court clung to names, to titles, to the weight of family and power. But this man had cast his away as if it meant nothing. "Then what should I call you?" she pressed. He met her gaze, and for the first time she felt something different in his eyes. Not fury, not fire, but a strange shadow of sorrow. "Call me nothing," he said. "I am only what I am." The princess swallowed, her throat tight. "And what are you?" His voice was steady. "I am human." The word struck her heart. Human. A sound that was still strange, still heavy with meaning. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, one of the guards appeared at the door, reminding her that her presence was dangerous. With reluctance, she left, but the sound of his voice followed her into her dreams that night. The second time she visited him, it was different. She found him not sitting but standing, his hands gripping the iron bars of his window. He did not turn when she entered. Instead, he spoke without looking at her. "Why do you come here, princess?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. She could not tell him the truth, that she was drawn to him, that she wanted to see him not as a prisoner but as something more. At last she said, "Because I want to understand you." He turned then, slowly, his eyes searching hers. "Understand me? No one understands my kind. Not even we ourselves. We live, we fight, we endure. That is all." "And yet you saved me," she whispered, his brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" Her voice was trembling now, her memory sharp with fear. The assassin. The night of the feast. The human's gaze softened just slightly. He remembered. The shadow that had slipped through the hall. The blade that had aimed for her throat. He had moved without thought, without command. His arm had caught the strike, and his hand had broken the attacker's neck before the guards had even reacted. "You should not have done it," she said. "You owed me nothing." He looked away, back toward the stars. "The beast protects its own." The words made her heart ache. She wanted to ask if he truly saw her as his own, or if he was only speaking of instinct, but she could not. The silence between them was too heavy. In the days that followed, her visits became frequent. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they did not. Sometimes she asked questions about his world, and he answered in riddles. "What do you eat there?" she asked once. He replied, "Whatever does not eat us first." Another time she asked, "What is your home like?" He answered, "A battlefield, and yet it is all we have." He never smiled, but his voice carried strange colors when he spoke of his world. She began to see it through his words. A place of endless storms, of beasts larger than castles, of skies that burned and rivers that raged. A place where only the strongest survived. And yet in the quiet moments she also saw something else in him. A loneliness. A weight that pressed down on his shoulders heavier than any chain. One night as she prepared to leave his chamber, she turned back at the door. Her voice was soft, trembling. "Do you hate me, human?" For a long moment he did not answer. His eyes were lost in the stars beyond the bars. Then finally he spoke. "No, I do not hate you, but I cannot bow to you either." Tears stung her eyes, though she did not let them fall. She left quickly, her heart breaking and burning all at once. From that night on, the bond between them was no longer just curiosity. It was something deeper, something unspoken. She had asked for a beast. But in her heart, she began to see him as something else. And though he refused to bend, though his spirit remained wild and untamed, the princess found herself drawn closer each day, not to the beast she had demanded, but to the human she had never. The court was no longer at peace. Whispers spread like poison through the corridors of the castle. Nobles spoke behind closed doors, their voices sharp with fear and envy. Servants carried rumors in hushed tones. Even the guards, hardened men who had seen many wars, avoided speaking the human's name aloud. He had done what no other could. He had killed the war beast with his bare hands. He had stood unbroken before chains, before blades, before death itself. To some he was a miracle. To others he was a threat too dangerous to keep alive. The High Lord was the loudest among them. "Princess," he said one evening, his voice echoing in the council chamber, "this human is not a prize. He is a storm. You cannot control him. Already the nobles fear him. If you keep him, he will bring ruin upon us." The princess sat in silence, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She remembered the way the human had looked at her in the torchlight, his eyes full of storms, yet his words soft when he said he did not hate her. She remembered how he had bled to protect her from the assassin's blade. "He has done no harm," she said firmly. "He has saved me once already." Would you demand his death for that? The High Lord shook his head, his face lined with sorrow. He does not bow to you. He bows to no one. A ruler cannot stand beside such a creature without losing her throne. The nobles already whisper that you are bewitched by him, that you care for him. The princess's cheeks flushed, though she kept her voice steady. Let them whisper. Truth is not decided by fear, but inside her heart trembled, because she knew the whispers were not lies. She did care, and that truth frightened her more than the rumors. That night she went again to the chamber where the human was kept. She found him sitting by the window, his arms folded, the moonlight falling across his face. His eyes lifted as she entered, calm but sharp. You should not come here so often, he said. They will turn against you. I do not care, she whispered. You should. His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it. Concern, not for himself, but for her. Your court is a nest of knives. They already hate me, and they will not forgive you for standing near me. Her chest ached. Then tell me, are they right to hate you? Should I fear you too? The human looked at her for a long moment. His silence was heavy like the sea before a storm. At last he said, fear me if you must. But know this, I have never broken my word. I have never bowed. I have never betrayed, I endure. That is who I am. His words cut into her heart. He was dangerous, yes, but he was honest. More honest than all the polished lies of her nobles. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the iron bar that separated them. Then I will not fear you, she said softly. For a moment his eyes softened. The fire in them dimmed to embers. But he said nothing more. The days passed and the tension in the castle grew. The nobles pressed the High Lord, demanding action. He must be killed, they said. He is no beast. He is something worse. If the princess cannot see it, then it is our duty to protect the kingdom. The High Lord resisted at first, but each day the pressure mounted. The princess was blinded by her own heart, they said. She had been fooled by the humans' defiance. She would doom them all. At last the High Lord came to her again. His voice was heavy with sorrow. Princess, I beg you, let us be rid of him before it is too late. She turned on him with fury. Enough, you see only danger, but I see truth. Do you not understand? He is not a monster. He is more than all of us because he refuses to wear chains. The High Lord bowed his head. That is exactly why he must not stay. Because he cannot be controlled. Because even you cannot control him. The princess's breath caught. Deep inside, a sliver of doubt struck her heart. Could it be true? Could the man she trusted, the man she was drawn to, turn against her one day? Would his wildness one day burn even her? That night she returned to his chamber once more. She could not keep the questions buried any longer. When she entered, he was again by the window, the stars reflected in his eyes. She walked to him, her voice breaking. Tell me, human, why do you fight with such fury? Why do you refuse to bend, even when it would save you? He turned to her, and the fire in his gaze seemed to burn brighter than ever. Because where I come from, bending means death. Where I come from, we are forged by pain, by hunger, by endless war. To bow is to be broken. To endure is to live. Her breath shook. She pressed her hand to her chest as if to steady her heart. But what of me? If I asked you to bow, would you refuse me too? The silence stretched between them. His face was unreadable. But finally he said, I cannot bow. Not to you, not to anyone. The words pierced her heart like a blade. She turned away quickly, her eyes wet with tears. She refused to let him see. She wanted to shout at him, to curse him, to tell him that he was ungrateful, that she had risked everything to protect him. But her voice failed. Deep down she knew he was not lying. He could never lie about this. The human was untamed. That was what made him what he was. And that was why she had wanted him in the first place. But now for the first time she wondered if the High Lord was right. To keep him near was to invite ruin. To let him go was to lose the one thing in her life that felt real. As she left the chamber that night, her heart was torn between fear and longing. She had asked for a beast and she had been given a human, and she began to realize that the two might not be so different after all. The castle grew colder with each passing day. The air was thick with whispers, the kind that clung to the walls like shadows. Servants hurried with their eyes lowered, guards spoke in sharp whispers, and the nobles gathered in secret chambers where the candlelight was dim and their voices were sharper than knives. The human had become the center of every fear. His strength had shaken the court. His refusal to bow had wounded their pride, and his bond with the princess was a wound that could not be ignored. One night, when the moon hid behind thick clouds, the nobles gathered with the High Lord. Their faces were hard, their words quick and poisonous. "This cannot continue," one said. "The princess is blinded," another hissed. "He is dangerous," a third whispered, "and her heart is chained to him already. If we wait longer, it will be too late." The High Lord sat in silence, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. He did not wish to betray the princess, for he had loved her as one might love a daughter. But he also loved the kingdom, and in his heart, he believed he was protecting it. At last he spoke. "Then we will take him quietly, without her knowing. We will end this before it destroys us all." And so the betrayal began. The human had grown restless in his chamber. He spent his nights staring at the stars, his thoughts far away. He could feel the shift in the air. He had lived too long on the edge of danger not to sense when it was near. One night, as the torches burned low and the halls fell silent, the guards came for him. Not the usual 2, but 10, armored and armed. The door burst open. Chains clattered. Blades gleamed. The human rose to his feet, his eyes narrowing. He said nothing, but his body tensed like a bowstring ready to snap. By order of the council, the captain of the guards declared, "You are to be moved." The human's lips curved into a shadow of a smile. Moved or buried? The guards did not answer. They surged forward. The fight was brutal. The chamber echoed with the clash of steel, the crack of bone, the roar of defiance. The human moved like a storm, striking, dodging, breaking chains and weapons alike. 2 guards fell, bloodied and broken. Another cried out as his arms snapped like dry wood. But there were too many. They had come prepared with nets weighted by iron, spears tipped with poison, chains heavier than before. The human fought until his body was slick with sweat and blood, until his breath came like fire. But even storms can be trapped when the sky itself closes in. At last they brought him down. The chains locked tight around his arms and neck. The poison burned through his veins, slowing his strength. He fell to his knees, his chest heaving, his eyes still burning with that untamed fire. The guards dragged him through the dark corridors, their boots echoing against the stone. They took him not to his chamber, not to the pit, but to the dungeons deep beneath the castle, a place where light never reached, where the air reeked of damp and despair. There, they chained him to the wall, his arms stretched, his body bent but unbroken. When the princess learned what had happened, it was already too late. She stormed into the council chamber, her eyes blazing with fury. "Where is he?" she demanded. The nobles bowed their heads, but none would meet her gaze. Only the High Lord spoke. His voice was heavy, sorrowful. "He is dangerous, princess. We could not allow him to remain free. He belongs in chains, or the kingdom will fall." "You dare?" she cried, her voice breaking with rage and grief. "You dare to betray me? To betray my word?" The High Lord's eyes filled with tears. "I dare because I love this kingdom. I dare because you cannot see what he truly is. He will not bow, not even to you. And one day he will break more than just chains. He will break you." Her hands shook as she pointed toward him. "You do not understand. He is not your monster. He is not your pet. He is—" Her voice faltered. She could not say the words. Her throat closed around them, her heart burning with pain she could not name. She turned and ran from the chamber, her tears blinding her. That night she went to the dungeons. The guards tried to stop her, but her fury scattered them like leaves in a storm. She descended the stone steps, the air growing colder with each breath until at last she saw him. The human hung in chains, his body battered, his face shadowed. Yet when he lifted his head, his eyes still burned, dim but alive. The sight tore her apart. She rushed to him, her hands trembling as she touched the chains. "What have they done to you?" His voice was hoarse but steady. "What they always do. They fear what they cannot break." Her tears fell freely now. "I should have protected you. I should have stopped them." He shook his head slowly. "This is not your doing. This is the way of power. Those who bow fear those who refuse." She pressed her forehead against his arm, her voice breaking. "I cannot lose you." For a moment his hand, heavy with chains, brushed against her hair. It was a weak touch, but it carried more strength than any word. "You cannot lose me," he whispered, "because I do not belong to anyone to be lost." Her heart shattered at his words. They were true. and yet they cut deeper than any blade. Above them, the castle stirred with whispers of treason and doom. The nobles celebrated their victory, believing they had caged the storm. But in the darkness of the dungeon, the princess's tears fell onto the human's chains, and his eyes, even dimmed, promised one thing. The storm was not broken. Not yet. The dungeon was silent except for the sound of dripping water. The chains clinked softly when the human shifted, his body heavy with wounds, his breath rough but steady. Days had passed, yet he did not break. He did not bow. His spirit still burned even as his body weakened. Above, the castle had become a nest of fear. The nobles believed they had won. The beast is chained, they said with relief. The princess will see reason now. But their voices carried unease. Because deep down they knew storms cannot be caged forever. The princess had changed too. She walked the halls with a cold face, her crown heavy on her head, but her heart was burning. Every night she went to the dungeon. She sat beside the human, her hands clutching his chains, her tears falling on the stone floor. "You cannot stay here," she whispered one night. "They will kill you if I cannot stop them. I will set you free." The human's eyes opened slowly. Even in the dim torchlight, they glowed with fire. "And what then, princess? Will you flee with me? Will you leave your throne, your kingdom, for a storm that cannot be tamed?" Her chest tightened. His words were sharp, but they carried sorrow. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to tell him she would give up everything, but her lips trembled with silence. She was a ruler. Her kingdom was her blood, her duty. Could she cast it aside? The human looked away. "You cannot, and that is why they will win, because you belong to your throne more than you belong to yourself." Her tears fell harder. "Then what do you belong to?" His answer was simple. "To no one." The words cut her, yet they also set her heart ablaze. He was everything she had wished for. Wild, free, untamed. And she knew, even if he left her, she would never be the same again. The next day, the council gathered. The High Lord stood before them, his face pale but resolved. "The princess will not act. Then we must. The human is too dangerous. Tomorrow at dawn, he will be executed." The nobles agreed quickly, their voices sharp with fear. None dared to see the storm live longer. But outside the chamber, a servant listened. And that servant carried the news to the princess before the candles had even burned low. That night, she went again to the dungeon. Her face was pale, her steps quick. She fell to her knees before the human, her hands clutching his chains. "They mean to kill you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "At dawn, they will not wait. I cannot stop them anymore." The human's eyes opened, calm, steady. "Then let them try." "No," she cried, her tears falling freely. "You will die, and I cannot—" Her voice broke. She buried her face against his chest. "I cannot lose you." For the first time, his hand lifted fully, though chained. It touched her hair gently, his fingers trembling from weakness. "You will not lose me, princess, because I was never yours to lose." Her sobs shook the silence, but beneath them something stirred. A sound low and heavy at first, then louder, the rattling of chains. The iron groaned as the human shifted, his muscles straining. The wall itself trembled. Her eyes widened as she pulled back. His teeth clenched, his arms bulged, and with a roar that shook the dungeon, the chains snapped like twigs. The ground shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The storm had broken free. The guards rushed in, torches and blades flashing. But the human moved like fire. He tore through them with bare hands, his body a whirlwind of strength and fury. No iron, no blade, no command could hold him now. The princess stood frozen, her heart racing. This was what she had asked for. A beast untamed, a storm unleashed, and now it was before her eyes, real and terrible and beautiful. The human turned to her, his chest heaving, his eyes burning brighter than ever. "This is who I am. This is who I will always be. If you come with me, you must leave your throne behind. If you stay, you will lose me forever." The choice cut her soul in two. Behind her, she heard the shouts of soldiers. Above her, she knew the council would already be preparing for war. Her kingdom was calling, but so was he. Her lips trembled. Her hands shook. She stepped forward, her eyes wet with tears. "I asked for a beast," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I was given a man, and now I cannot let you go." For the first time, the human's fire softened. His hand reached out and she took it. Their fingers clasped, rough against soft, storm against crown. Together they fled the dungeon. The castle roared with chaos, guards shouting, nobles screaming, the High Lord calling her name with sorrow in his voice. But she did not look back. The gates burst open before them. The night air rushed against their faces. The stars stretched above, endless and wild, and the human, untamed and unbroken, pulled her into the storm of freedom. The kingdom behind them shook with fear, but in her heart, the princess felt